Hello for the 28th week, October the 12th and 13th. First reading from 2 Kings and then the Gospel from Luke 17 again. You can't get around in these readings this week leprosy. So I'd like to ask that old disease, Hansen's disease, what does it really represent? Or is there anything like that in today's society? Leprosy is, I guess, the most describing it's that old disease. It's almost like an adolescent who has a severe case of acne for his or her whole life. And it was so ugly, so bad, and it was a disease, and it was repulsive. And so the leper was the one who was out of order or unclean in society. That he or she was pushed off to the side, really pushed out of society and the community because they were unclean. The leper was not considered a sinner, but unclean, and therefore the people couldn't be around them. The leper was one who was not allowed to go to the temple and worship with the people because of their disease. The leper was not allowed to even live in the city or the village because of their disease, not because they were sinful people. And so what they had to do was they had to wear torn clothes. They had to keep their hair unkept, if they had any. They had to put on a scarf or a band around their face, the lower part of their face. They would have to scream out or cry out, "Unclean, unclean," whenever they came in contact with people in the community. And sometimes they even had to ring a little bell. That did you know that an unclean person was coming around you? They were total outcasts, but not sinful outcasts. It's important. So if you were a Naaman in the book of Kings in the Old Testament, with leprosy, you were sort of doomed in society. If you were one of the 10 lepers that Christ met, you were the dregs of society, the disease in society. Get out of the way. Get away from me. A sort of a negative concept of quarantine people from society. Can you imagine the deep psychological effects that this has had on people? The communal ramifications of their life and lifestyle now, and the spiritual disorder of these people's lives. Many people have compared our old concept of homosexuality as leprosy, a disease. Don't get around me. You don't belong in our community. And even the church has aspects of this in their terminology when they look and they list it as an intrinsically disordered person or a grave depravity. You may agree with that or not agree with that, but many people say that's sort of a modern day form of leprosy. Well, just look at those two readings and see how God deals with the leper, how Jesus, who is God, deals with a leper. In the Old Testament, God's prophet Elisha, he tells Naaman to go bathe in the Jordan River, plunge in the Jordan River 7 times, and boom, through the prophet, God cures Nathan of his leprosy. As it says there, his flesh became like the flesh of a little child. That God wanted Naaman to have flesh like a little child. Beautiful, beautiful. Or Jesus Christ listening and hearing the 10 lepers cry out, and Jesus Christ, not just a prophet, but the prophet who is God, cures all 10 of them and says, not just go into the river, but go show yourself to the priest. And they all go their way, but one doesn't even make it to the priest. One goes right back to Jesus and says, thanks for enabling that person to be clean, to be able to function once again in society. And that leper gives thanks. And as usual in some of Jesus' stories, that leper was not a Jew. That leper was a Samaritan. And the Jews didn't like Samaritans. But God likes Jews, Samaritans, and every one of us. So what's the point? Well, I think the point is God, Jesus Christ, is calling us to live in community with one another. Just look at the world, I just saw a documentary on Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not a great city because of a port or an industry or anything. It's only great because the God presence. In Jerusalem, there is the Jew, the Muslims, and the Christians. And they're called to be in community with one another and live together with one another and love one another. Not what the past history for multitudes of years has shown us. Live together in community. We see so much of in our government in Washington. Well, you guys, you gals, work together in community, in unity, or for service for all. I think that's what God is calling us to do, to live, love, forgive, and be good for one another. And so in community, the Republicans and the Democrats, and the Tea Party are called to live in community and work in community, to love, forgive, and contribute. You can say the same thing with the community of Christian churches. The Roman Catholic Church, the Episcopal Church, the Methodists, the Baptists. We're called to live in community. Not just, we're right, you're wrong, but live in community with one another. And finally, it goes as far down as our family. A mom and a dad, a brother and a sister, or whatever combo that you might have. We're called to live in community. That's the will of God. That's the vision of Jesus. And I think that's why God and Jesus, God in the Old Testament and Jesus in the New Testament, chose a person like a leper who has been ostracized. And God says, I want to bring them back. Come join the community, the kingdom of God. So we might not have lepers around. We have others that can sort of take their place or be like them, whom we have ostracized and with whom we do not work in community. And so I ask myself, am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution in this? Have a good day.